Hello and welcome to the Tracy Sandler Show, brought to you by FIVO. This is our last show before the big game on Sunday, and I am very excited to be joined today by Rams beat reporter for The Athletic, Jourdan Rodrigue, who's amazing, and I have been wanting her to come on the show for quite some time. But when we're done, don't leave, because I have a little segment that we're calling Quick Hits with Deebo Samuel. Yes, all-star lineup today. Jourdan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm such a huge fan of yours. I feel very cool that I get to open for Deebo Samuel today. I feel like a very cool opening act right now, so this is awesome. Thanks for having me.
You are welcome. This actually is a really good opening act, and I think you should always open for Deebo Samuel, so we'll see if we can make this a thing. So big game on Sunday. I don't know if you heard. Rams are playing the Bengals in the Super Bowl.
I've heard something about that.
Yes, it seems like kind of a big deal. Obviously, you've had a big week, and you've had quite the season covering this team. So if you can kind of just take us back, you can remember back to training camp. When you looked at this team, the superstars they had, then they have the trade deadline, and they get OBJ, they get Von Miller. When you look at kind of what they've done, did you feel this was where they were headed?
You know, they were in still such a build mode in training camp, and you saw the excitement, and they returned such a star-powered defense, Aaron Donald, Jalen Ramsey, even before bringing in Von Miller, and guys were feeling good and healthy, but at the same time there were so many questions about the offense, right? And they were still evolving it and building it, and you would see Matthew Stafford, the Rams traded for in January, you'd see him and Sean McVay, Kevin O'Connell, Cooper Kupp, and Robert Woods. You'd see them stand out on the practice fields long after practice was over. Guys had hit the showers, and they would just be literally diagramming things in their hands. They would be talking and communicating. You know, Sean McVay would have his little play sheet, his little notebook out, and you could really see that they were troubleshooting this thing. And that was, to me, really interesting, because this was a team that was learning what they could be. They were learning about their potential, and they continued to try to learn about their potential, I think, through the first part of the season. It was so explosive in the first part of the season, with especially all eyes on Matthew Stafford and how he would do in this new offense and how they would push the Sean McVay system forward. And you saw they were explosive. They were using a lot of things, you know, out of drop back sets and empty, and they were still using a little play action like Sean always does, and as you know very well, covering Kyle Shanahan.
That tree.
The tree is alive and well, people. Yeah. But they were also troubleshooting in real time. What works? What doesn't work? What does Matthew like? What does Sean like? How can we combine those things? That was the beginning of it that you saw in training camp, and you didn't know what they would be. You also saw some really cool stuff.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, it was really neat. Some of the arm angles and the no-look passes. I remember staring down the barrel of the first no-look pass I've ever seen in person, standing in the back corner of the end zone, and I yelled a word that I shouldn't have been yelling as a media member in attendance.
That's awesome. Well, we won't tell, and I think that's just fantastic. It's, it's funny. You bring that up, though, and I think it's worth talking about. We are media members, but we're sports fans. And so sometimes you see something cool, and you kind of got to...
It was very cool.
You acknowledge it.
It was very, very
cool. So that's totally fine.
Yeah.
So speaking Matthew Stafford, obviously much to talk about there. They make the trade. Jared Goff and McVay, the relationship clearly had disintegrated, and they felt they could only get so far with Jared Goff. Matthew Stafford comes in. Has he exceeded expectations? Is he what you thought he would be?
You know, sometime around October, I asked Sean McVay that very question, and he said he's actually better than we thought he would be. He said, I knew he was going to be good, didn't know he was going to be this good. And then obviously, they hit the streaky period in November, and they have to really battle through some of their own self-created adversity at that time. But as we look over what Matthew Stafford's been able to do with the Rams over the entire course of this very, very long, historically long season, where I cannot believe it's been over a year at this point since they traded for him. Time has no meaning, apparently, anymore.
No, none.
And you look at not just what he's produced. They were one of the most explosive offenses consistently through the entire season. He was, he has played in the postseason just really exceptional football. He has been the fourth quarter guy who they dreamed he would be. He has done all of those things, and statistically he's done what they've expected him to be. But I think where the real difference is made here is the main problem that Sean McVay had in continuing to work this offense with Jared Goff, and the frustrations that compounded into the disintegration of their professional relationship, not necessarily their personal one, was that a ceiling had been established, and they never felt that they could break through again. That 2018 season was remarkable, and Jared deserves a lot of credit for that. But they never felt that they could break through and go past that point again with things as structured as they were. But part of that was the system too. And part of that was Sean McVay needing to combine and collaborate with a quarterback who's a veteran, who could do all types of things with his arm angles and shoulders, the things he does with his eyes, and also with the post-snap processing and the multiplicity that he lends to an offense. You needed to push forward, and you needed to design new things that defenses were not wise to anymore. Jared Goff in the Rams offense had gotten solved. That wasn't just Jared Goff. It was also Sean McVay.
Right.
But you couldn't push the limits anymore. You couldn't push further. You couldn't break through again with Jared Goff at quarterback. You had to go back, and as I always say, covering this team, you had to go create a catalyst in that regard. Their catalyst was Matthew Stafford.
That's a really great way to put that, and I'm really glad that you said that, because you're right, it wasn't just Jared Goff, and oftentimes in this league, it all falls on the quarterback.
Yeah.
And everything's the quarterback's fault. We see that on the team I cover all the time.
I was going to say, you know that dialogue
The
very
49ers
well.
make a mistake on defense, and half of Twitter is like, Jimmy Garoppolo. Oh my God, Jimmy Garoppolo's not even
He sneezed at the
yeah,
wrong
exactly.
time.
Well,
Caused a ripple effect.
He knows the defense. Like, what are you talking about? And sometimes it is the combination, and sometimes the change needs to be made because the relationship has gone as far as it could go. So I'm really glad that you said that and put that way, because I think that's an important distinction, and I think that's something that people should listen to, fans should listen to. 49ers fans, if you're listening, just throwing it out there.
Sometimes it's healthy to move on.
Sometimes it's healthy to move on for everybody. It's also Jourdan dropping some really good relationship advice here.
I was like, this is good actually. This is useful.
We've gone from the Rams to relationships, and now it is dating with Jourdan Rodrigue.
You need your tea. Where's your cup of tea?
We need tea. Like, this is totally a whole new podcast now. Okay, so Robert Woods having an incredible season, goes down with the ACL injury, heartbreaking. They bring in OBJ. I have a question about this, because when they brought him in, one of my things was there are a lot of egos on this team now. And I'm not saying that these guys have egos. I'm just saying you have a lot of elite football players on one football team. Sometimes that works, sometimes it does not. Was there ever a concern, and how has Odell Beckham really just ingratiated himself? Because it seems to have been a pretty seamless transition.
Yeah, and you know what? They never had a reason to be concerned about him, and that's part of it. I think when you go into a new environment and there's all of these misconceptions maybe about you, and there's past drama, and there's past, again, God, we're getting into relationships again.
Yeah,
right?
here we go.
It's like, here we go again.
Here we go again. This has turned into a dating and Super Bowl podcast.
But it really is like Sean McVay, what he's really, really good at, and that entire building, top down in that organization, what they're really good at is meeting people where they're at, and it's a very sort of come as you are environment. It's very football obsessed, as you know. You cover a similar one, and it's very evolving obsessed, it's very learning obsessed, it's very troubleshooting obsessed. And if you are into doing those things and you want to do those things, they'll figure you out for who you are along the way.
Right.
And I think that was first one of the most important things, because it was very clear. They're like, you're going to hear a lot of talk about this in the media. You're going to hear a lot of questions about, are you concerned? Are you concerned? But what really matters is what we're doing in this building right here. And Robert and Odell Beckham is on the phone with the Rams receivers, calling and making sure they are okay that he signs with the Rams, expressing to them he wants to sign with the Rams. He called them the morning of the signing, and he asked them, are you okay with me coming in here? I understand I'm going to be the 3 or the 4 because you guys are already set up. I understand that. Are you okay with me coming in? I want to make sure I get your blessing. And all the Rams receivers were like, hell yeah, man, come on down.
Right.
And then
Let's
obviously
really
sad that, then Robert tears his ACL literally a day later after they agreed to terms. And so then he's forced into a position where now you have to step up. You have to make sure that you're working your way into that offense, that you're doing all of the little things behind the scenes, not to replace Robert Woods, but to do a lot of things by committee, that entire group, in order to sort of make up for the fact that you don't have one of your best receivers on the field. But he did those things, and I think the coaches, Sean McVay has called him a joy to coach, because he wants to be coached, and that's kind of indicative of how they are with the building in general. They already had a lot of big personalities before Vaughn. Like before Vaughn and Odell got there, they already had Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey on the same defense, and then you've got stalwart left tackle Andrew Whitworth on the other side. You've got Matthew Stafford, Cooper Kupp, and guys who are names, guys who, even if the public doesn't necessarily know a lot about them, the NFL knows a lot about them.
You know who they are.
Exactly.
You say those names, everybody knows who they are. Even the most casual fan knows they exist.
Yeah.
And that says a lot.
Exactly. And they've never had an issue with all of those guys existing quite happily, and also producing something rather cool and very, very positive in terms of win-loss and success. they've not had an issue with it. And again, it goes back to what I sort of described. Everybody is that culture. Once you are established long enough, and again, you know this because of where the team you cover. Once you have that and you've established that consistency, and you know your identity as a team, and you can do that sustainably without fear of being punished for failing year over year over year, that culture becomes living. It becomes animate. It sort of wraps around people who come in, and it expresses itself to them, and then they become a part of it. And I think that that's one of the most interesting things that we're seeing right now is these guys are all friends. They all like each other, and then they all go out there and they go to work for each other, and it's very, very cool to see.
I love what you just said, year after year being able to fail without being punished. And I think that's so important because bad football teams stay bad when every year they're changing coaches.
Yeah.
Every 2 years they're changing coaches. That's how bad football teams stay bad. And, we've seen it in San Francisco. There was a lot of the show. It was Kyle Shanahan on the hot seat. No, he is absolutely not on the hot seat.
Imagine firing him when all that was happening. Because I remember I was looking at all the pieces and everything. Imagine where they wouldn't have been, or what would have happened if they would have just pulled the trigger right there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a very quick break to hear from our sponsor, and then I have more Sean McVay questions. Okay, Jourdan. In the NFC Championship game, the Rams won, so it worked out. One could make the argument Sean McVay had a little bit of a meltdown there with about 10 minutes left in the fourth quarter.
What challenges? What timeouts?
I remember tweeting, the Rams are out of timeouts. There are 10 minutes and 1 second left in this game. All signs pointed to the 49ers winning that, but whatever. Onward and upward we go. They didn't. But he had a little bit of a meltdown in that game. Is that something you expect to see that Sunday, or do you think that's Kyle Shanahan related? Which is such an unfair question, but I'm asking it anyway.
But these guys, something weird always happens.
Always.
And
Always.
And the 49ers, I think the 49ers have had obviously a right to understand that they've owned this matchup. But that's the thing. This is an outlier team. Outlier teams make the Super Bowl. Outlier teams can win the Super Bowl. And the Rams this year are an outlier team in that regard. And so, repeat. Something has to break at some point, right? And the Rams, I think part of it not only was, they totally redesigned their defensive scheme for 1 week and 1 week only, specifically for this game, to great effect for the first time in quite a while.
Quite some time.
And then that's something to applaud. But then on the other side, Sean McVay is things aren't weird enough.
Yeah, let's make this weirder.
Let's make this. And again, but they traded weird moments, like the punt that was heard around the world, and the run stop, the Eric Weddle run stop that sort of led to that decision making process. It's almost like they had to out weird each other a little bit, right? I do criticize Sean a lot for his conservatism on fourth downs, because I think that he is so progressive in terms of football in so many other ways, and he has such a unique mind, I think, and many, I think many people would agree, but it's just right there where he hits the wall a little bit. And I think that that's something that I'm interested to see. Every margin, every leverage, every 0.25 of a point of advantage will be so crucial in a game like this where everything matters. And it was really interesting to see because the Rams set up everything as their best defensive game plan of the year, first of all. It was their best defensive performance of the year considering the circumstances and the stakes also. Matthew Stafford did what he needed to do, and the Rams run game in the first half did what it needed to do where it hadn't in so many ways through the other matchups. And, Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham did everything was fine. Everything was good.
Was fine.
And that's where I get concerned is because and I think I would hope, and I think he did learn a lesson from it, and I would hope that he did, because it goes to show that in this sport where so many plays happen and so many moments happen, you can have perfect conditions or you can be in your A-plus plan, and human error can still wreck it all.
Much like relationships.
Oh, my God. I was like, she's got something cooking. I could see it in her eyes.
We're going back to But it's true, and that is the thing with football, too, is that people get mad on a play and they blame one player, but there's so many things that can happen. But you're right, and there was a situation where human error almost brought it all crumbling down.
It got weird for a moment.
It got weird. Okay, so let's talk about Sunday, where I think the Rams are probably hoping it doesn't get weird, but where the rest of us are kind of hoping it does, because that's just more fun for all of us. But let's talk about how the Rams match up against the Bengals. Obviously, you have probably one of the best defensive lines in the league against maybe one of the worst offensive lines in the league. And we saw Joe Burrow get sacked like a gazillion times. Don't check those stats exactly, but basically a gazillion
fair
times.
estimation.
It's a fair estimation as in the playoffs and throughout the season. How do you see this one going, and how do the Bengals match up against the Rams?
You know what? I think it's kind of an insidious matchup, actually, because yes, the defensive line will almost certainly get after this Bengals offensive line. We probably know that to be a truth at this point. It probably will happen. But the Bengals also have a really good quick game, and the Rams are still unsteady at inside linebacker. Kyle Shanahan exploited this every year for the last 2 years at least, specifically that middle part of the field with a quick passing game. That's on film. The Bengals know that. Zach Taylor's been on the receiving end of some of those games, so he knows it too. And the Bengals do have a quick game. They can have catch-and-run plays. They can force the Rams corners to tackle where they've been a little bit up and down. The non-Jalen Ramsey corners, Jalen Ramsey finished the season with like 10 tackles for loss, which is insane for a cornerback. But all the other guys, they can try to target those guys and exploit them and try to make them tackle in the perimeter, where it's been a little hit or miss, no pun intended, for the Rams this year. And so I think that you are going to see that type of a plan from Cincinnati if the pass rush starts to get there, not just to protect Joe Burrow for those final moments where we know he can try to just make things happen, but also to make sure that you're sort of rendering that fierce pass rush almost ineffective. You're almost countering it with that type of schematic difference. And so this will be a really big game for Ernest Jones on the Rams side, inside linebacker, who's still working his way back from the ankle injury. Another big game for Eric Weddle, who is expected to be actually calling the defensive signals for this game.
Wow. What a difference few weeks makes.
Out of retirement.
Yeah, wow.
What am I doing with my life?
I know, right? Like, God, 6 weeks ago I was basically doing the same thing, and I am not playing in the Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, and you know, Raheem Morris has to confirm that, but our Dan Pompei did a great story on Eric Weddle earlier this week, and Eric told him as much. So you're sitting there and you're like, whoa, that's big.
Wow.
And so it'll be huge. And then also, obviously, I think, you know, because the Bengals, they do use a lot of 11 personnel, you're going to see that too high, that shell, that roof that the Rams do historically, like traditionally over the last 2 years, like to keep over the back of the defense to limit the explosive plays. You're not going to see the game plan that they used against the 49ers.
Right.
But you are going to see them try to be really multiple on the back end. You're probably going to see pattern matching and a lot of different things. And I would expect Jalen Ramsey to also have quite a bit of snaps against Jamar Chase.
Oh, I would imagine that's to me, that's like the matchup I'm kind of the most excited about, is the Jalen Ramsey versus Jamar Chase matchup, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun. All right, before I let you go, game prediction.
Oh man, I'm so bad at these.
You don't have to do scores, because I'm bad at scores, so I don't make people do them.
That's nice of you.
Just like winner or loser.
Yeah, I think the Rams will win. I do think they'll win. I think that they went through adversity at the right time, that stretch of November that they learned how to rally from. They also had a lot of situations outside of their control happen to them in December in terms of, you know, a pandemic breakout in their building, and 32 players and coaches were unavailable. They repackaged their run game. They did all of these things. They adjusted where they needed to, and then they battled through a lot of different things. And I think that they have found themselves at where we kind of talked about at the beginning of the podcast. They were still learning about what their potential is. Now I think they have found themselves at the right time.
I am picking the Bengals mainly because I have all week, and only because of Joe Burrow, even though conventional wisdom and everything else tells me the Rams should win this game. But I have this new I don't bet against Joe Burrow thing going on.
Yeah, that's fair. He's a hell of a player.
He is, and he's the difference maker, so you never know. So that is what I am going to go with. Jordan, thank you so much for joining me. And if you guys like what you heard, and I know that you did, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review and follow us on Instagram at Fangirl Sports Network.